What is up? I am going to be reacting to your MMA hot takes, MMA unpopular takes, and they better be unpopular or they better be something fresh, something that we haven't heard before, something that at first glance most are going to disagree with. And I'm going to let you guys know if I agree with you or if I disagree with you and why. So without further ado, let's get into this. JDM beats Prime GSP, Ank beats Jones. The sport has evolved. These old heads don't hold a candle. Belal would have smoked GSP too. You know what? I don't know if I'd say smoked, but I do agree. And this is the thing. People are going to say, no, Belal and GSP. Listen, JDM had 5 rounds striking with Belal Muhammad and couldn't put him away. I don't think GSP is putting him away on the feet. And I don't think GSP is taking down Belal Muhammad. And I don't think GSP is keeping up with the pace that Belal Muhammad put on JDM. I actually agree. That is a hot take, and I actually agree with it. I think Belal, again, I don't know if I'd say smoked. I think it'd be competitive, but if you think about it, how is GSP winning that fight? He's the better striker. Okay, like Belal may not look that slick, but he was able to hang in there with JDM. Yeah, he got outstruck. Yeah, he lost basically every round, but JDM is a much better striker than GSP. I know GSP was a good striker. He wasn't an elite striker. Belal's a good striker. He's not an elite striker. The volume of Belal, the granite chin, plus the insanely good takedown defense, that's a fight that stays standing, and I might favor Belal. And, you know, the argument against that is, no, GSP took down this guy, and that, yeah, these are guys that don't have the takedown defense of Belal Muhammad. Okay, he dropped Michael Bisping. That's a guy that doesn't have the striking or the chin of Belal Muhammad. And I totally agree with JDM. I think GSP would have a better shot at taking down JDM, but JDM proved he had good takedown defense against Belal. And I know Belal's maybe not as good of a wrestler as GSP, but JDM's takedown defense looked pretty brick wall-like. And Belal shot like 8 or 9 takedowns in that fight. Definitely went all in for some of them, and JDM stuffed those takedowns. And I think that JDM on the feet with a guy like George St. Pierre, I think he could finish him. People are going to say that's disrespectful, man. Dude, we're talking about the last 2 champions in the welterweight division. The current modern-day 2025 welterweight champion and the last guy to have the welterweight belt before the current guy, who also held the belt in 2025, won it in 2024. I don't think that's a disrespectful take, okay? I think GSP beats a lot of modern fighters in the welterweight division, but I don't think he beats those guys. I think those guys are bad matchups. And I agree, Ankalaev does beat Jon Jones. I do agree with that. A little bit of an assumption that Ankalaev's takedown defense is amazing. Who has really shot takedowns on Ankalaev? But the boxing, the speed, it's an issue for Jones, dude. If Dominic Reyes' boxing is an issue for Jones, and listen, Reyes' boxing is okay, but it's not the same level as Ank's. He doesn't have the same defensive instincts as Ank's. He doesn't have the same speed, the same counter-punching ability as Ankalaev. I agree. I think Ankalaev gives Jones issues. And I think that, again, Jones, no power in his hands, nothing for Ankalaev to worry about. I think the kicking game would be an issue for Ank, but I think Ankalaev could beat him. Yeah, but again, similarly to what I said about Belal and JDM against GSP, there aren't many fighters that I would pick to beat Prime Light Heavyweight Jones. I pick a few, but I think Ank is one of them. So, yeah. Speaking of yes, if you're tired of being skinny fat, built like a twig, or just a straight up blob, then it's time to say yes to the Ultimate Lifting Program or the Novice Lifting Program, because that'll actually give you an incentive to get a move on with your journey to getting in shape. If you want to gain strength and you want to put on muscle and you're interested in checking out one of these programs that I've created, the link is in the description of this video. Make sure to use code MMA for 30% off. First up, you can't complain about the state of the UFC if you stream pay-per-views illegally. I see what you're saying, but I don't necessarily agree with that, because if you disagree with what the UFC is doing and you would like them to change, the best way to get the UFC to change is to deprive them of your pay-per-view purchase, okay? Because if everyone just says, well, you know, listen, I have problems with the UFC, but I'm going to buy every single pay-per-view no matter what. Well, why would the UFC change at all? So, I mean, you're saying You can't complain about the state of the UFC if you stream every pay-per-view illegally. That almost assumes that the complaints about the state of the UFC all have to do with fighter pay. And I would sort of understand it if it's about fighter pay. Hey, you can't talk about fighter pay if you're streaming illegally. But like, what if you're just not happy with the cards? What if you're just not happy with the fact that the UFC is, especially the promotion, is very weak? It's very lazy. Well, who's to say you can't get that paddle boat out, drop it on that river, and start paddling east, man? Now listen, obviously we're joking. We would never paddle out east. I'm just saying, I don't agree. I don't agree at all. But, you know, I do get the pay-per-views. I do actually get the pay-per-views. Next up, Marty Lewis would easily beat modern MMA goats of today, GSP, Topuria, Jones, Islam, and dominate them. The sweet pea was too much, and most UFC fighters can't even move their head. Modern MMA goats of today and dominate them. I don't know. That's a tough one. I definitely agree with the fact that he definitely beats GSP. He definitely beats Islam Makhachev and Topuria. I think Jones's wrestling would be a little bit difficult. I do think Jones's wrestling would be a little bit difficult. We know Marty Lewis had good wrestling. He was famous for actually preparing the freestyle wrestlers on the U.S. Olympic team for the Greco-Roman wrestling. Marty Lewis was a Greco-Roman wrestling guy because back in the day, if you guys don't know this, Greco-Roman was like the equivalent of the boxers. They used to go like this. You know, Greco-Roman's like that old school wrestling. Marty Lewis was an old school guy. So, yeah, I do think Jones would give him some issues. The kicks would be a bit of a problem, but yeah, I mean, obviously GSP's wrestling pretty good, but, you know, because Marty Lewis was a bit heavier, I think he'd be able to, with the wrestling that he has, be able to do all right, keep it on the feet, and I would pick him to school GSP as well. So, yeah, let's get on to... That is a pretty hot take, though. That is a pretty hot take, because the thing is, most people haven't even seen Marty Lewis fight. And you know, I shouldn't be laughing, because it's actually kind of sad, because they've tried to erase him from history. So I should be more respectful when even talking about the situation, but most people haven't even seen him fight. Most people don't even know. Most people don't even know he exists. So, to prove that Marty Lewis beats GSP, like, you ever see one of those photos where it's like, what take are you defending like this? And it's like one person surrounded by a million other people. It feels like you're defending a take in that situation when you're bringing up Marty Lewis beating GSP in MMA with wrestling. So, yeah, hot take? Dude, the definition of one. Current McGregor would beat current Ferguson. That actually is a hot take, and I agree. Now, first off, McGregor's just bigger than Tony Ferguson. The problem with Tony Ferguson in the latter half of his career, and I feel like the latter half of Tony's career is longer than the actual rookie mode, young prime, and late prime mode version of Tony Ferguson. The latter half of Ferguson's career seems to be the longest part. But I do agree. I think right off the bat, Tony's problem nowadays is that he's deteriorating physically. Like, Tony has been getting smaller. He's gotten skinnier, and Conor McGregor is probably on the sauce as well. I know he's in the testing pool, but yeah, fucking right. For how long? 2 weeks? McGregor's going to be in the testing pool for 2 weeks, and then he's going to recognize that he's got a yacht and he's off to the next country, right? But listen, I think McGregor probably beats Tony Ferguson by just mogging him. Honestly, I think McGregor could just punch Tony in the chest with a big meaty hook that he's used to training on the fucking round pad. And I think that alone would sit Tony down. So I would agree. Although you do have to take into consideration Tony Ferguson and his calf kicks would actually be an issue, because McGregor did kind of fold the calf kicks, and Tony Ferguson, if there's anything that he still has the capability to do in an MMA fight, it's landing some calf kicks. But I kind of agree. I think McGregor is just... he probably outweighs Tony by like 35 solid pounds. Okay, let's get on to the next one. As much as we talk about the UFC's promotion being dog shit, the fighters literally don't help at all. You're right. You're absolutely right. And that's why I made an entire video about how we took the fans, the fans took the trash talking era for granted. I mean, I remember there being a time where Tony Ferguson was getting 1 million+ views on a pre-fight media day scrum where he was like holding court. They asked him probably 2 questions in a 20-minute span, but Tony Ferguson was just going off for 20 minutes straight. And you'd get one of those every 6 months out of Tony. You had Kevin Lee trying to be the next Conor McGregor. And you know what? The fans hated him for that. And I understand why, right? There were a lot of Conor wannabes at the time, and people loved Conor because he was original, and anyone that's not original, I mean, they were going to get shit for trying to copy his flow or whatever. But I do think it made the sport more entertaining, okay? Essentially, they were just getting more attention on their fight, giving us some drama. And what did we get? We got the Michael Chiesa, Kevin Lee brawl at a press conference. We had the Kevin Lee, Tony Ferguson face-to-face. I mean, there was a time where Justin Gaethje and Michael Johnson were talking shit. That was like a big moment at a press conference. And then, of course, you had Darren Till. Every dog has its day. Things were more entertaining when fighters were talking trash. And now it's so rare. It's very rare that fighters talk shit. And when they do it, it's on Twitter or whatever, but it's not when they're in the UFC's limelight where, you know, it's fight week and it's their time to promote the fight and the fight only. Yeah, and it also, I mean, to be fair, the UFC doesn't really help them that much as well because they're not doing face-to-faces. I mean, they didn't even bring Marvin Vettori and Brendan Allen up at a press conference when those guys had beef. They didn't do a face-to-face with Manel Kape and Muhammad Makhachev. I mean, they even cut Muhammad Makhachev. And Dana White's always saying, oh, it's the fight game. Crazy things happen. But Muhammad Makhachev gets cut for having a brawl in a hotel against other fighters. Give me a break. But you are right. I think that because there's been a culture that was created by fans sort of bashing the idea into fighters that, you know, you're not cool if you're doing a gimmick, or trash talking is cringy. Trash talking is cringy, and everyone that trash talks is a McGregor wannabe. That idea was beaten into the fighters, and now the meta for fighters is, I would rather leap into Mount Doom than play anything up. The new meta is, it's not just being boring, but it's like not trying at all. I'd never try at all. Now, I feel like Patty's the kind of guy to be like that. Tom Aspinall is someone that is like that, and he always voices exactly what I'm talking about. Tom Aspinall always talks about how, you know, he would hate to have an antic, right? And to be honest, for Tom, I think he's actually one of the few fighters where he doesn't need one and he's just effortlessly entertaining. Tom Aspinall is not even like super funny, but he's just entertaining because he's well-spoken and because he is relatable and he gives good interviews. I mean, I think Tom Aspinall has some of the most entertaining interviews and content, and he's not even doing a whole lot of, you know, crazy shit on his YouTube channel. He's just driving to the gym, doing Q&As. But most fighters that take the Aspinall approach, they aren't going to be nearly as entertaining. I don't think Patty has a gimmick either, but Patty's another example of someone that is just effortlessly entertaining. But most fighters that like, yeah, I see what Patty the Batty's doing, man. He's so real, man. Most fighters, you try to be the, you know, I'm just me, man. Okay, well, how is that going to translate on an interview, though? Because you don't have a crazy Scouser accent, lad. Because maybe you're not the funniest guy to begin with. Maybe you should play it up. Maybe you should say, I'm going to knock this guy out. I'm going to knock this guy out. You know, imagine if a fighter just got up at media day and just said, I'm going to knock this guy out, and just yelled it. And they were asked like 15 questions. And they just yelled, I'm going to knock this guy out. That would actually go viral. Like, people would say, yo, what is this guy's issue? And maybe people wouldn't like him. But they would take notice. And maybe that's where the gimmick starts. Think simple. Just think simple. But this is the problem. Fighters can't be bothered, lad. Nobody is lifting a finger to try to trash talk these days. You're right. Fighters don't help. Next up, Arman is a tougher fight for Ilia than Islam is. I don't know if this is the hottest take, but I would say that it is a take that may be a little bit unpopular for sure. I disagree, and I think it's actually a hot take for a reason, because it ain't a good one, man. And I'll tell you why. I was just throwing the take over there. I'll tell you why. Because Islam Makhachev is much more dangerous on the feet compared to Arman. I think that Arman is a problem insofar as he is similar in stature to Ilia Topuria, and his wrestling may be a little bit more physical. But ultimately, I think that Makhachev is actually more dangerous on the ground. I know Arman is good ground and pound, but I think Makhachev has a higher chance of finishing people on the ground with very quick submissions, as opposed to Arman Tsarukyan, who kind of needs to establish control and, get a couple of minutes under his belt before he really starts reining in the ground and pound. But yeah, so first off, Makhachev is just more likely to submit you. And then on the feet, Makhachev is pretty dangerous in the clinch. I don't know if I would say Arman Tsarukyan's clinch striking is anywhere near the level of Makhachev. So Makhachev, dangerous in the clinch. Ilia Topuria has a boxing style. He's always crashing forward, and Makhachev can meet him there, whereas Arman can't necessarily make him pay. At range, I also think Makhachev is a better striker, so I don't agree at all. I think that Arman is actually a much easier fight than Islam Makhachev. I think that Arman is a tough fight for Ilia, but I don't think he's as tough of a fight as Islam Makhachev, and I already think Makhachev and Tsarukyan lose to Ilia Topuria. So I would favor Topuria in both of those matchups, but I would give Makhachev a better chance than Arman, just because I think he's a little bit more dangerous on the feet and even on the ground. And I think you need to be dangerous for Ilia. And also, I just think Makhachev's striking is a little bit more elusive. He's less hittable than Arman. And I've said this before, but, I just mentioned that you have to be dangerous to defeat Ilia, but I actually think that the guys that will do the best on the feet are always the elusive strikers. What do you know? The 145ers that are quicker on the feet and more elusive, like Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski, did a whole lot better than Charles Oliveira, the big, powerful lightweight. I think that Makhachev is slicker on the feet. I think he's harder to hit, and I think that will give Ilia more issues than Arman. So I disagree. Skill for skill, Alex is better than Ank, but lost due to hesitation. I don't agree at all. Now, I do agree that Alex is a more well-rounded striker than Magomed Ankalaev, but I don't necessarily think that makes him better. I mean, I think Magomed's got a pretty good kicking game. I think Magomed's got pretty crisp boxing. I mean, listen, Magomed doesn't have a lot of fancy techniques. He doesn't look that slick. He does look slick. Slick's not the right word to take away from Magomed. He is actually very slick, but Magomed doesn't have the best Muay Thai kickboxing combos. He's either throwing hands or he's throwing a kick, and he's not mixing them up. Pereira looks more impressive sometimes on the feet, but as far as the second part of your statement goes, and also skill-wise, Magomed is so much better on the ground, but hesitation being the reason he lost, I totally disagree. I mean, think about it. First off, I'm not going to say that Alex wasn't hesitant, but that's not the reason why he lost. The reason why he lost is because Magomed was beating him to the punch in all of the boxing exchanges, which made Alex Pereira hesitant. But the reason why he was hesitant is because Magomed, if Alex was going to let his hands go, Magomed would likely beat him to the punch and win those exchanges. Like the Weasel says, straight punches beat looping punches. And Magomed Ankalaev's straight left hand was rocking Alex Pereira early on in that fight. And I think that Pereira was getting outboxed. And I think that there's an argument to be made that actually if Pereira is more aggressive in front of Ankalaev, he could just get chinned, because Magomed is always going to be faster than him, and he's going to be able to crack him and counter him hard. And Magomed Ankalaev, very good defense, extremely quick boxing combinations. I think the hesitancy may actually prove to be a better game plan for Alex Pereira if he goes out there and gets KO'd in the rematch because he's more aggressive. Now, maybe he comes out in the rematch, he's more aggressive, and you end up being right. And I do think that he may have a better chance of winning if he's more aggressive, but I also think that the risk of him losing brutally goes up tenfold. And I think that Magomed beats him in the rematch. I do like Pereira as champion. I do think he's more entertaining, but I think Magomed just has his number. I think Magomed is a better fighter than Alex Pereira. I think Alex would be more dominant in striking battles against other light heavyweights, but I still think Magomed beats them. But when Magomed and Alex fight, I know Magomed wasn't dominating him, but Magomed doesn't have a style where he dominates people. He has a style where he just does enough. But even when he's just doing enough, he sets himself apart from everyone that he fights as better. And even though that fight that he had with Alex Pereira, it was close, Magomed was the better fighter. Get on to the next one. Gaethje hits harder than Ilia. I disagree. I totally disagree. You know, this is why. There's this argument that, oh, actually, Ilia doesn't hit that hard compared to the other heavy punchers at lightweight. The reason why he gets the type of brutal flatline KOs that he does is because of his accuracy and his speed. And although that's definitely part of it, because, I mean, just think about speed alone. It's the punches you don't necessarily see that really fuck you up. And the punches you don't see, you're more likely not to see a very fast combination as opposed to a average speed combination. So that is part of it. But it also assumes that just because someone is fast and technical, they're going to have devastating consequences when they land their punches as well. I can think of some other great technical fighters like Alexander Volkanovski. Is Volkanovski's boxing as good as Ilia's? Maybe not, but his boxing is elite, and he's extremely fast. And he has never had anywhere close to the level of consequences that you see when he lands punches compared to Ilia. And also, you're talking about Justin Gaethje. Just as people would say Ilia's power is overrated, it's really his speed and his technicality and footwork and all that makes the knockouts happen. Just because Gaethje grunts when he punches doesn't necessarily mean he hits harder than Topuria, okay? If anything, there's an argument that actually Gaethje puts more effort into his punches. Like, I know that when you have good technique, it allows you to have more torque because the technique is there to set up better punching, right? If you have absolute dog shit technique with a right hand, it's not going to be as effective as someone with a good technical right hand. But Gaethje, Gaethje is still putting like more into his punches. Gaethje puts 100% steam on some of his punches, and he's still not cracking that hard, man. Yeah, Gaethje's technique is not that great with his boxing, but, he's able to land some pretty crispy hooks in the pocket. I've seen Gaethje land some really good uppercuts, some excellent uppercuts, and he's sitting people down, but he's not sleeping them out cold, okay? And those uppercuts are hard. And Gaethje, I would say, weighs more than Topuria. Gaethje's not even knocking people out with these uppercuts. He's dropping them. There's like, you rock someone, then you drop someone. I'm talking about the different levels of consequences. There's dropping someone, TKOing someone after you drop them. It's like you drop them, and then you have to land a couple follow-ups. And then there's flatlines. Ilia Topuria is flatlining people. And yeah, he's swinging a lot into his punches. I'm not one of these guys that thinks that just because it's technical means you're not putting any power on him, man. Take all the power. There's some freaking MMA nerds that think that, technique equals no power and no, nothing's forced. It's all technical, man. Just take your time, man. No, I obviously know Ilia Topuria puts a lot into his punches, but Justin Gaethje's putting more. I'll tell you that. Justin Gaethje's putting more. And he's not coming close to the results that Ilia is having. I mean, even his most brutal KO against Edson Barbozi, I poked Edson Barbozi, and Edson Barbozi couldn't see the shot coming. Like, it wasn't just because Gaethje hit really hard, but his second most brutal KO, I mean, you can't even bring up James Vick because a gust of wind would have knocked him out. But I would say the Cowboy KO, and, it took him a couple of punches there. Gaethje has never consistently had the flatlining ability of Ilia Topuria. Never, ever. Topuria flatlined Jai Herbert. Topuria flatlined Volkanovski. Topuria flatlined Charles Oliveira. Like, just because he's grunting doesn't mean he hits harder. Arnold Allen is going to become a champion at featherweight at some point in his career. He's very slept on. He had a very, very close fight against Max, arguably beat Evloev, and is insanely explosive, powerful, and well-rounded. I wouldn't say he's insanely powerful. I would say he's very explosive. He's very quick twitch. But I wouldn't say he's insanely powerful, man. Like, Arnold Allen is not really known for KOing people. And the last time he's TKO'd someone, it was Dan Hooker, and it was like a standing TKO where he landed like 15 punches in a single combination. So I don't know if I would say he's extremely powerful. He's powerful. He hits hard. I say he hits a little bit harder than Volk, but not much. Volk's got that, like, you know, high-level thud, right? But I wouldn't say Volk is like a power puncher. I'd say Arnold Allen is like a very, very low-level power puncher, okay? But very explosive, very fast. He did arguably beat Evloev. Just rewatch the fight. He won rounds 1 and 3. I think this is a hot take that you may have a point with. The problem with Arnold Allen is that he hardly ever fights, and the division is always passing him by. I mean, think about it. He fought Giga Chikadze at the end of last year, or maybe it was the very beginning of this year. I think it was last summer, actually. I think it was actually on the Aspinall Blades card. That was Arnold Allen's last fight, and he hasn't fought since. This guy never fights because he breaks his hand in every single one of his fights, and he has to take an entire year and a half off. And the division, the whole landscape of the division changes. And the next thing you know, someone like Diego Lopez, that isn't even in the UFC, when Arnold Allen is like ranked number 6, can be fighting for a title. And Arnold Allen has only had like 1 fight, while Diego Lopez has had 7 fights since he got to the UFC. It's a big problem for Allen. So I would say that it's likely not going to happen, but I could see him doing pretty well against Diego Lopez. I could see him doing pretty well against Yair Rodriguez. I could see him doing all right against Gene Silva. And I don't know if he beats Gene Silva, but either way, that's probably his toughest fight. Volk as well. I think Volk could beat him right now. But when Volk retires, then it's just him, Gene Silva, and Evloev. I mean, listen, he's capable of beating Evloev. He literally did it before. So this is actually a very hot take, and I think it's a good one. But I still think it's probably unlikely, just because, again, the division's always passing him by. Having a close fight against Max and arguably beating Evloev is a really, really good look. I think Arnold Allen may be one of the most underrated fighters in the UFC. This is definitely making me think about it a lot more, but I think this is a pretty interesting take. Imavov has the most underrated resume, with Buckley, aged well, Dolidze on a 3-fight win streak, Cannonier, great win, Allen, who was on a win streak, and Izzy. He also was beating Curtis up until the no contest. Yeah, I totally forgot about that, but that's true. He even took his back multiple times. And now he has a chance to beat Cow, which I think he will. That is a hot take. I think most people would agree with it, but it's a hot take insofar as, like, you know, no one ever says shit like this. No one ever really talks about Imavov's resume like that, but you're absolutely right. Just reading the names on his resume, that is very impressive. That is probably one of the most underrated resumes I've ever seen, period. I'm not even talking about, are we talking about fighters that have had entire careers and we're looking at the resume when it's all said and done? No, that's just in general. Considering Imavov only has 1 loss in the UFC, right? Sean Strickland's the only loss. That resume is pretty unbelievable, like, especially considering he's not even fully hit his prime, or maybe he just hit his prime. That is pretty crazy. Buckley, you're right. Got the win against Buckley. It has aged well. Dolidze, 3-fight win streak. I mean, we'll see what Dolidze can do against Anthony Hernandez. Allen, that's a good win. I think Brendan Allen, pretty well-rounded fighter, pretty solid. Staple in the top 15 at middleweight. Adesanya knocked him out. That was 1 fight removed from Adesanya looking phenomenal against Dricus du Plessis. I mean, I know people say Adesanya was washed, but dude, Adesanya had one of the best performances of his entire career against Dricus du Plessis. He lost. So people are going to say he was washed and old and whatever. They're just going to look at the result and the submission. But Adesanya actually looked really good. He's always had issues with boxing. I don't think that he got KO'd because, oh, well, all of a sudden he's washed. I mean, maybe he's taken a lot of damage in his career, and maybe he would have been able to take that punch better back in the day. But at the same time, Adesanya's never had the best boxing defense, and sort of likely that he was going to get cracked by a big right hand against a guy like Imavov, right? Either way, you're right. Beating Curtis, you could almost count that as a bit of a win. I think that's a really good take. Yeah, Imavov's resume is actually very, very good. Next up, Marty Lewis's big right biscuit is the only thing that would be able to take out current Aspinall. Man, that's actually interesting because everyone talks about the Sweet Pea Special. They talk about the hooks to the body and the duffel shuffle. The big right biscuit. Aspinall is very hittable. He always runs in with his chin on the silver platter. Chin on a silver platter. The platter is there meeting the big right biscuit. It's almost like, you know, he would put the biscuit in the platter, dude. And then you could serve the biscuit on a platter. I think you're right. I think you're right, bro. Gene Silva is the only fighting nerd with true championship potential. Cal Baraujo. You know, I haven't even heard Bedtime's rant. I clicked on Bedtime's video yesterday, Nightmare Champions, and I know he included Cal Baraujo, which is a hardcore take, dude. Real hardcores don't want Cal Baraujo as champ. Cal Baraujo is like the most forced hardcore fucking fighter ever. Like, only the wannabe hardcore fans are like diehard Cal Baraujo fans. You know, listen, I like Cal Baraujo. I think he's kind of entertaining. I wouldn't say he's like the most entertaining. I mean, he's had some boring, stinky grappling fights, but something I think I agree with. Prochazka, after what we saw against Ian Gary, listen, Ian Gary's very good, but dude, I know everyone just remembers the last round, but Ian Gary absolutely schooled Carlos Prochazka and made him look foolish on the feet, made him look like a lower level striker, a significantly lower level striker. Oh, but the fifth round, yeah, okay, the fifth round, but Ian Gary had his way with Carlos Prochazka for 4 rounds and made him look slow and incompetent on the feet. Maybe Prochazka can bounce back. I don't know, man. That was a bad look. That was a really bad look. Who else? Rofi? We'll see. We'll see what Rofi can do. If Rofi can KO Benoit Saint Denis, like, listen, I think he might beat Benoit Saint Denis, but if he makes it look easy, I think that I might have to disagree. But until I see what happens with Rofi and Benoit Saint Denis, I think it's a pretty good take. And that's, again, because Rofi is still in the unknown. He's not faced a good enough level of competition for us to really get a good idea of where he's at skill-wise, which is why a lot of us are so excited to see him fight Benoit, because Benoit Saint Denis has the direct opposite style. He's not slick. He's a marauder. He's not a striker. He's a guy that's going to come crashing forward. He will throw some strikes. He is capable of hurting you on the feet, but he's trying to take you down, and he's a heavy pressure grappler. So, you know, that is a style that Rofi's going to have to answer a lot of questions against, and we'll see what he can do. But because there's still a lot of unknown about Rofi, I'm not ready to say he's the only one with true championship potential, but if you remove Rofi from the conversation, I agree. I think that Cal and Prochazka, after what I've seen, again, anything can happen in MMA. They can get better. They can improve, okay? And maybe Cal Baraujo schools Imavov, and I totally changed my mind. Because Dricus du Plessis at one time looked like shit against Brunson, and then he went on to beat Robert Whittaker, right? But yeah, at the moment, I agree with you. I think that right now, Gene Silva is the only fighting nerd that I can confidently say will be champion. Jiri Prochazka would have beaten Jon Jones if Jones decided not to move up to heavyweight. I know this is controversial, but hear me out. Jon Jones never considered a power puncher. He heavily relies on his kicks and stinging with those front kicks and oblique kicks. And we all know that Jiri will keep his composure until eventually he finds that big right hand, which is extremely effective with Jon Jones' style because Jones never looked great with heavy pressure punchers. Example, Gustafsson. I think this is a pretty interesting take. I do see what you're saying. I definitely think you're making a good point. The problem is you didn't really mention the grappling, and I think that's a huge part. Now, obviously, at one time, Jon Jones was looking like a not-so-dominant grappler in the light heavyweight division. I mean, he really had troubles taking down Thiago Santos. Granted, he didn't really try that much. I mean, he shot maybe 4 takedowns in that entire fight. Maybe 5. I don't know if I'm slightly underestimating or overestimating, but either way, he didn't shoot that often. Against Dominic Reyes, he did shoot. Not that much, but they were stuffed pretty effortlessly. And yet he dominated Anthony Smith on the ground and easily out-grappled him, but it's Anthony Smith. It's not Jiri Prochazka. I think that the 2020 version of Jon Jones, the 2019 version of Jon Jones, I think him versus Jiri, I honestly might favor Jiri Prochazka as well, just because of how durable he is. Yeah, Jon Jones could definitely whoop him up on the outside with kicks, but I don't think that's stopping Jiri. And I think that the lack of boxing and the lack of power for Jon Jones would be a huge problem against someone like Jiri Prochazka, who is, first off, one of the most powerful light heavyweight punchers we've ever seen. I would say he's top 3 most powerful punchers in light heavyweight history. Right up there with Rumble Johnson and Alex Pereira. I would say he's right behind Rumble, but right up there with Pereira, right? Maybe right behind Pereira, but, I think Jiri's right hand is lethal. Maybe not as lethal as Pereira's left hook. I forgot that's how you know it's been a minute since Pereira's fought. I forgot the punch that he's famous for. It's that right hook, right? It's the right hook of Pereira. It may not be as lethal as Pereira's right hook, but no, his left hook, obviously. But yeah, I think that with Jiri's power and his very slick, sneaky, looping right hand that he crushes everyone with, that's a serious issue for Jones. And the thing is, Jones has no power coming back in Jiri's direction. Jiri Prochazka is also one of the most durable fighters we've ever seen at light heavyweight. I mean, dude, I pick Jiri Prochazka to win every fight because of his, unfinishableness, because he's so durable. The only reason why I picked Pereira is because, okay, Pereira is the one guy that has the power to be able to put this guy out, but I don't think anyone else does. So, I agree. Well, I mean, I think Magomed has the speed to hurt him, but I agree with you. I agree. I think that Jiri would have a good chance to beat Jon Jones. The grappling would be interesting, though, because if Jones is going into that Jiri fight, again, we're talking about the 2020 Jones. Heavyweight Jones, well, we don't know how Jiri looks at heavyweight, but the heavyweight grappling version of Jones, I think he beats Jiri. But light heavyweight Jones, I think that'd be a really, really good fight, and I might actually favor Jiri. Last but not least, Volk kind of should have got the nod over Islam. Right off the bat, this sounds like some cope. Right off the bat, it does sound like a bit of cope. Volk, I could just imagine some guy pouting with his hands in his pockets. Volk kind of should have just got the nod, man. Yeah. Okay, but I'll hear you out. Let me read this. Volk kind of should have got the nod over Islam, let's be honest. Scoring rounds is lame as a fight. So far, actually, you're starting to win me over with this argument. It's a fight. We're doing Joe Rogan rules, and I am joking around a little bit here. But when it comes to, I know what you're saying, the vibe of the fight, if you just watch the fight and then say who won the fight, not, it's a sport we got to go round by round, mate. Volk was picking up steam as the fight went on. Volk was the underdog going into it. But again, I think it is a bit unfair to decide who wins the fight in part with your preconceived notions of the fight, right? Like, we should just look at the fight for what it is objectively. And that's actually kind of why we rely on rounds, because, again, when you're saying who won the fight, I don't think it's very easy to detach what actually happens in the fight from what you thought going into it, which was Volk is the small fry. Makhachev is probably going to dominate, and he's definitely going to school Volk on the ground. When Volk goes out there and does better on the ground and defends submissions really well and puts up a really competitive fight, because you're shocked, because he is defying the odds and he is surpassing expectations, you are very impressed. And when you're done watching the fight, you leave impressed with Volkanovski. So again, part of that has to do with what you thought about before the fight. Listen, I'll tell you this. Did Volk win the MMA fight? Did he win the UFC fight on paper? No. Did he win the fight in the hearts and the minds of the masses? Yes. Volk won the fight in our heart. Okay? And I'm cool with that, man. I'm cool with that. Volkanovski. Listen, there's a reason why the UFC had Volkanovski as the pound-for-pound king after that matchup. It's because after that fight, you're still looking at Volk like the best fighter on the planet because of how well he did. And I don't think that's cope. I think that that's because, dude, holy shit, Makhachev was talked up so much going into that. We had so much respect for Makhachev's game and his skill set, given what he did to Charles Oliveira, who at the time was looking like, you know, someone that would have crushed Khabib, at least at the time. That's what we were thinking. So we thought so highly of Islam Makhachev, and for Volkanovski to go out there and be yelling at him, right? Well, he has his back, or be popping him up on the feet and scrambling and knocking him down and beating him up in the last round. We're looking at that guy as, holy shit, this guy is way smaller, but this guy is just, he's too good. He's too good for Makhachev, this guy that we think is going to steamroll everyone. It's just going to be too good for everyone. That's really what it was. It was Makhachev. He's just too skilled, man. He's too much. He's too big and he's too skilled. All right, that's a deadly combination. 10 out of 10 skill. He's got the size and strength advantage anyway. It's just too much. And then Volk does what he does. Looks really good. Looks like the tough guy after. That's really what it is. Volk won the tough man contest. Volk won the tough man contest. And for that reason, you could say that Volk won the fight. Okay? Now, did he win the match? No. I thought he did initially, but he didn't win the match. I've watched it back enough. We're 2 years past that fight, and we're sober enough now where we can be honest with ourselves and say he lost round 1. As much as it pains me to say, he lost rounds 2 and rounds 3. He arguably lost round 4. I think there's still an argument for Volk to win that by mogging Makhachev on the ground. But still, Volk won that as a fighter. He won that. But round 5, Volk won. But yeah, I think that's an interesting take. But anyway, guys, that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Until next time.